Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Sorry, somebody was ringing in on me, but that's okay. I just have to call them back later. Oh, hold on a second. Let me mute my mic. I'm sorry. Okay, she hung up. That's okay. I'll give her a call back later. I hope everyone's doing a great day today. Thanks for coming in. Okay, she hung up. That's okay. I'll give her a call. Mute my. All right. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips a balance in favor of fair use. After I do this live, I want to welcome y'all to the next live discussion. Hello, David, Kim. It was brought to my attention that somebody looked at the old profile on my Amazon, my first book, and the negative comment that the person called me mother. That was actually my ex daughter-in-law, and I'll go more into that in the next live. Okay, so let's get more into this story. This is the second segment of Preachers, Priests, or Pastors Who Defile Our Children, Part 2. College Ministries Pastor David Savala. Has anyone heard of this case? I'm going to put trigger warning here. So let's get with the share the screen. I'll have to end up muting this mic so it don't be a bleed over. I have some videos in a minute. How a Christian college ministry glorified a sex offender and enabled him to keep abusing students. Here he is right here in the center. Savala. There he is. Daniel Savala urged generations of Chi Alpha members to get naked in a Houston sauna. Why did Assemblies of God pastors keep bringing teenagers to his home? A revered missionary challenged his young followers to live for Jesus. It was all part of his plot to get them undressed, he confessed later. This is part 2. We want to thank NBC News for getting this articles out about pastors and pray. Daniel Savala leans back in a cloth armchair, raises his right hand, and swears before God what he's about to say is the truth. Looking into the camera, the Pentecostal missionary speaks in a slow, measured sentences, describing how, for decades, he gained the trust of college students who came to his ivy-draped bungalow in search of spiritual guidance. Using scripture, he convinced them they could open up about uncomfortable topics like pornography and masturbation. Then he would strike, touching their penises and pressuring them to touch his, all under the guise of bringing them closer to Jesus. I knew that I was wrong, Savala says in the video, filmed by a lawyer in 2023. But I did it anyway. Here he is right here. And when I see his picture, I kid you not, it looks like a guy I had seen on Plenty of Fish doing videos. He looks identical, but his name was Savala. He put an I there. Religion, he says, was a tool of his deception. People can just see that spiritual part of your life without seeing the whole of who you are and the person he truly was. Manipulative, he says, matter-of-factly, cunning, sinister. In the 2 years since Savala recorded that confession at his home in Houston, Texas, lawyers, activists, and whistleblowers have worked to untangle how a convicted sex offender with an 8th grade education managed to convince scores of pastors and young Christians to put their faith in him, and why church officials repeatedly failed to stop him. So let me go ahead and mute my mic while I play that audio there. Make comments. Okay.
Now to an NBC News investigation into a pattern of abuse at the world's largest Pentecostal denomination, the Assemblies of God. For decades, a man who some called the holiest man on earth abused young men and boys. Survivors and advocates say for a long time, church leaders looked the other way. A warning, some content in this story might be hard to hear.
I can tell you that I'm a registered sex offender.
A shocking confession from youth minister Daniel Savala in his living room.
I knew that I was wrong.
Joseph Cleveland's youth pastor brought him to that same room when he was 15.
This is like right after I met Daniel.
Now a father of 3, Cleveland says back then he was looking for a father figure himself. He was told Savala could help guide him.
He was more like a guru. Like if you struggle with something, let's go ask Daniel.
When did your relationship go from spiritual guidance to something else?
Day 2. It starts kind of slow. It starts with him changing in front of me. Or let's talk about masturbation or pornography.
Cleveland says Savala's openness was revelatory.
I can finally talk about this stuff with somebody who everybody has told me to trust and respect.
But for a decade, Cleveland says Savala took that trust and twisted it.
Probably within a year, he kind of progresses to like oral sex, where he kind of forces himself on me.
Makes you do that?
Yeah. Sorry. Every time you talk about it, you relive it. So. And I remember distinctly him grabbing the back of my head and forcing me onto him. It's a memory that never goes away.
That abuse allegedly happened here in Savala's ivy-covered bungalow, nicknamed the Lion's Den. Other victims say it happened here in the backyard sauna. According to lawsuits, police reports, online forums, and interviews with NBC News, Savala had access to boys and young men through Chi Alpha, a college campus ministry run by the Assemblies of God, the world's largest Pentecostal denomination. In a statement to NBC News, the Assemblies of God says it directed Chi Alpha leaders in Texas to stay away from Savala in 2018 and took appropriate actions when it received reports of sexual abuse in 2023. But records show the church knew of Savala's misconduct years before all that.
This is what you call your war room.
Yes.
Ron Blumenkemper Jr. was a member of Chi Alpha in Texas in the 90s. Years later, Blumenkemper learned that in 2012, Daniel Savala was charged with 11 counts of sexually abusing boys in Alaska. He pleaded guilty to 1 count and was a registered sex offender. Chi Alpha leaders in Texas rallied to his defense.
They raised the money for him. They wrote letters to the judge.
For his defense.
For his defense.
Back in Houston, Chi Alpha members continued bringing young men and boys to see Savala. Over the next decade, at least 6 people alerted the Assemblies of God that Chi Alpha was exposing young people to a sex offender. NBC News found emails and phone calls were dismissed or ignored. In 2023, Bloomingkemper launched his online forum.
Story after story of people saying, I told, they did nothing.
It was the forum that changed everything for Stephen and Jessica Holt.
I call my husband and say, I think that this is Papa Daniel, and if it is, our son has been to his house.
Their son, a minor we're not naming, was just 13 when he was introduced to Savala through their former church, years after that conviction in Alaska. The Holts thought it was an honor.
Daniel was Jesus, Moses, Daniel, Papa Daniel.
The holiest man on earth.
But they say Savala used that persona to groom victims and normalize abuse. They say 4 Chi Alpha members trained by Savala abused their boy.
The guys were pulling their penises out in a circle, encouraging our son to do the same. They would put his head in their crotch and make, sexual sounds.
Why do you think these men who are accused were able to abuse your son over and over again?
He trusted them. And they had phrases of nudity is unity. Everyone does this. It's normal.
Savala says much the same thing in that 2023 confession tape he made with a lawyer obtained by NBC News. It's unclear why he made the video.
I would say, oh, this is natural, this is fun, and I won't tell anybody.
In that video, he says the church had no idea what he was doing. Savala is in jail, facing criminal charges, but has not entered a plea. His lawyers did not respond to a request for comment. 6 of Savala's proteges are also charged with sexual abuse. The Holts sued the Assemblies of God for negligence and settled for an undisclosed sum. The Assemblies of God says they were heartbroken to hear allegations against Savala and the pain his reported actions caused, saying they're doing everything we can to help.
What do you want to see from the Assemblies of God now?
I want to see them release all the reports and take full responsibility. We knew he was a registered sex offender and we didn't do enough, and we're sorry.
An apology is what many say they're waiting for.
In 2023, the Assemblies of God did an internal investigation into the alleged abuse. Accusers like Joseph Cleveland, who you just saw in our story, say the Assemblies of God hasn't made enough changes. They are urging the church to release a report on that investigation. Meanwhile, Daniel Savala is awaiting trial. At least 10 people have accused him of sexual misconduct in criminal filings, lawsuits, and signed statements.
Can you believe only 90 days when he was sentenced? This was that him as a little boy. Joseph Cleveland was 15. He talked about that. So let me go to the next. We just did this video, so no need to go that. The judge rebukes the Assemblies of God for failing to turn over records in sex abuse case. The Pentecostal denomination hasn't complied with discovery orders in a lawsuit accusing it of failing to protect students from a sex offender. This is the Assemblies of God headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. A Texas judge is cracking down on the Assemblies of God for repeatedly failing to turn over documents as part of a lawsuit, accusing the Pentecostal denomination of mishandling sex abuse allegations. At a hearing last month, District Court Judge Lauren Reeder, based in Houston, said the denomination's national office had been flagrant in its failure to comply with the orders to produce records related to alleged abuses by Daniel Savala, a convicted sex offender and former missionary. Pastors in the Assemblies of God's college ministry, Chi Alpha, held Savala for years as the holiest man alive and sent hundreds of teens and young adults to his home for spiritual guidance, including after he was convicted of child sexual abuse. Reader told lawyers representing the Assemblies of God on August 11th she would order the denomination to pay some of the legal fees of two former Chi Alpha members who sued over alleged abuses by Savala. Reader also threatened additional sanctions, including holding the church in civil or criminal contempt of court if it failed to comply with her orders to produce reports, investigations, personnel files, and other documents. You don't get to just decide when to start engaging in the discovery process. Reader told lawyers representing the church according to a transcript. Assemblies of God officials declined to comment on pending litigation. John Sullivan, a Texas lawyer representing the denomination, acknowledged while under oath and being questioned in court that his client had not fully complied with the court's orders to produce documents, according to the court transcript. Sullivan testified that his client had been hoping to avoid the expense of going through the court's incredibly broad request for production. Well, excuse me, y'all keep going through the people through the Assemblies of God through their church thing, and we seen yesterday where it failed a lot of girls. The judge's rebuke. Excuse me, I need another drink. The judge's rebuke comes after the Assemblies of God, which is nearly 3 million members across 13,000 churches in the United States, faces criticism from abuse survivors and whistleblowers over its refusal to release internal investigations into the church's handling of sex abuse allegations against Savala. Hello, Eric Daniel Kiss. Good to see you. This is crazy. These advocates have called on the Assemblies of God to commission an independent review of its handling of sex abuse allegations nationwide to ensure vulnerable church members are protected in the future. This is him right here. This was after his arrest in 2023. In signed statements, lawsuits, and criminal filings, at least 10 men and boys have accused Savala of sexually abusing them, many at his Houston home and in his backyard sauna. An NBC News investigation revealed last month that senior Assemblies of God officials were warned repeatedly about the dangers Savala posed, but failed to cut off his influence, allowing more teens and young men to be abused. Two of Savala's accusers, identified in court documents as John Doe 1 and John Doe 2, sued the Assemblies of God last year in Houston, alleging that church leaders were negligent in allowing Savala to work with students. In November, Reader ordered the Assemblies of God to produce documents related to allegations of Savala's misconduct, but nearly 10 months later, the denomination has still failed to do so. Court records show. What other denomination did we hear this about too? Was also the Watchtower. The Watchtower has done the same identical thing. Angeline Nigam, the leader for John Doe's 1 and 2, said the Assemblies of God's failure to produce documents fits a pattern of denomination leaders stating publicly that they are doing all they can to help Savala's alleged victims while withholding information from her clients in court. They say to the public they're letting the facts shine. Nagam said in an interview with NBC News, in the lawsuit, what they are doing is keeping it in the dark by not producing documents and information the court has ordered them to produce. Savala and the young men whose faces have been obscured by NBC News. Thank you so much for obscuring their faces. Dozens of boys and young men have described how Savala, age 69, used scripture to convince him to strip naked in his sauna. Visiting his Houston home became a rite of passage for generations of Chi Alpha students in Texas. Even after he pled guilty in 2012 to sexually abusing two boys in Alaska in the 90s, over the decade that followed, state and national assemblies of God leaders were warned repeatedly about Sabala's presence at Chi Alpha events, according to interviews and emails obtained by NBC News. But Chi Alpha pastors continue to bring students to him for spiritual guidance. Not what for spiritual guidance, just so that they could go ahead and do what he wanted to do. They knew. The former Chi Alpha student identified in the lawsuit as John Doe II was one of them. He says Assemblies of God pastors sent him and other students on mission trips to Savala's house to do home repairs for the man they called Papa Daniel. Savala sexually abused him for 2 years, starting in 2013, according to the lawsuit. John Doe I, a blind student who joined Chi Alpha hoping to find purpose and friendship, says Savala groomed and sexually abused him from 2017 to 2022. This included coercing the student to have oral and anal sex with Savala, according to the lawsuit. Savala's alleged abuses became public in 2023 and after survivors spoke out on an online forum created by whistleblowers. He was charged with sexually abusing 4 boys since 2005, all of whom he met through pastors connected to Chi Alpha. Savala has yet to enter a plea on the charges, and he and his lawyers didn't respond to requests for comment. This is where victims of college ministries, sexual abuse seeks answers. Go on over here. Let's play this one. Hey, Carlene, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. That's what we were playing a little earlier. So it was playing that a little bit earlier, so no need to replay that. Y'all can go back and watch that again if you like. So the Assemblies of God officials addressed the controversy at their biennial meeting last month, pledging to take steps to prevent anything like it from happening again. They're pledging, but they're not doing anything about it, I promise you. When I go to do the last of the Assemblies of God, we're going to go over the booklet for the Assemblies of God, okay? We're committed to identifying within our system, within our structures, what's broken, what can be fixed to prevent these kinds of things, said Doug Clay, the denomination's general superintendent. Donna Barnett, the denomination's general secretary, defended the denomination's refusal to release the findings of an internal investigation by a law firm, because she said doing so would violate the privacy of victims and deter others from coming forward. The victims want it. The victims want it. We want justice, okay? You're just trying to cover up all the different ones that's doing these acts towards our kids and letting them back into the system of preaching and going and delivering these kids. I mean, the one I did yesterday, y'all, if y'all haven't seen it, please go back and watch it. Because one of the girls, when the church had got her, they questioned, the church people did, okay? These group of men sat around like a arch type table, like a semicircle. And one of the questions they asked her was to describe the predator's penis. She failed to mention that he had a freckle on it, okay? So they called her a liar. They called her a liar because she did not mention that his penis had a freckle on it. Anyway, DeGrom said Barrett's comments, which were reported by NBC News, were the first she heard about an internal investigation by the Assemblies of God's national office. I do not have that document, DeGrom said. Those documents should have been provided in this litigation, and they have not been. Reader, the judge is expected to decide at a future hearing how much the Assemblies of God will be ordered to pay in legal fees and whether she will impose any additional sanctions. In legal briefs filed last week, Nagam asked the judge to award $57,000 in legal fees and requested that she further punish the Assemblies of God by instructing jurors at trial that they can infer from the denominational's failure to produce documents that the church knew Savala was a sex predator and did nothing to stop or warn children and young men from being sent to him. They're taking a verse in the Bible and saying how we need to forgive and all that. So they say that, okay, he seems like he's different now, so we're going to put him back into the ministry, okay? How sick is that, y'all? When the Bible specifically tells what a preacher should be, And that definitely is not down that line. The Assemblies of God has said it took appropriate actions once it received reports of sexual abuse by Savala. Lawyers for the Assembly of God said the church hoped to settle a lawsuit filed by two former Chi Alpha members who say Savala abused them. We want it all opened up. Let's not just worry about the Epstein file. Let's worry about these churches. This church Assembly of God, it's got the predators. They got black books in the watchtower for the predators there, and they're ostracizing the victims for telling, just like they did the victims in yesterday's story. Lawyers representing the Assemblies of God South Texas District Council didn't respond to a request for comment. Nigam said she hopes the court's moves force the denomination to reveal what state and national officials did or failed to do in response to allegations about Savala. My clients have been wanting to have the truth come out, and that is a real driving force in why they filed this lawsuit, Nigam said. You can't conceal facts. That's not permitted. So let me go back to change this to unshare that. So how's everybody doing today? I want to go and see the next one we are going to do it on. This is going to be a lot longer tomorrow, but I will be doing a live shortly at 1:30, and I hope that y'all will join into that discussion, because there are people that come down on survivors of horrific abuse for telling, calling them liars, saying that the different things, right? So the one tomorrow will be the Assemblies God, churches shield child sex abuse allegations. It's going to be huge. So I hope that y'all come in and y'all continue to support. I'd say God bless each and every one of y'all. Thank you for coming. Please advocate and get the word out.